And it's really strange. I loved math, but I wasn't that good at it, and I hated English, and I was really good at it.
You hated it, you were good.
But anyway, Norm remembered, I'm just gonna say
I didn't
this,
like
Norm
either one of
remembers
those.
in high school that I had the idea for this first book.
Uh-huh.
Way back then, the concept, it's changed a lot since then, but, oh yeah, and so, and Tom will verify, I've written a lot of songs. And writing and in the service, finally, you know, I was in E6 before it was over. A lot of a lot of efficiency reports, a lot of maintenance reports, on and on and on. And I was pretty good at it. I didn't mind doing it. You know, sometimes it was drudgery. I'd rather do something else. But finally, you know, anyway, I'm not going deeper than that. But yeah, all my life I've realized that yeah, I can write. It just wasn't that burning passion to until I'll get into that in the talk. But I'll explain when that kind of kicked in. But yeah, and kind of surprised me when I got it done.
I can do this, huh?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And time I got the second and the third, and then it was like, and it wasn't until I got the sixth one done, 5 or 6, it was the sixth one, I wrote another one after that. I realized, I said, you know, I don't know how people will see this. I said, well, I can actually call myself an author. But it just, instead of 1 or 2 or something, it's like, it was enough books where I finally was relaxed enough to say, yeah, you can call yourself an author. So,
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it until Monty mentioned it. And he goes, he's got some books on Amazon. I'm looking for Leroy Thissell.
Yeah.
And finally I found L.E. Thissell.
Yeah.
And then read your biography. That's what I'm looking for.
yep, that's it. Do you remember my cousin Joanne?
Yeah?
You know, she just got done writing a book and it just came out. And she was pretty nervous about it. It's kind of an autobiographical because, you know, about her being in a wheelchair and
Yeah.
her
I dated
her
a
faith
little
over
bit.
the years and stuff like that. It's kind of geared toward younger people, mostly like her grandkids and stuff, but it's on Amazon. It came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, she was a nice person.
Yeah.
I liked her.
Yep. And you know, it's been a rough go. When you're in
Where's
that
she live?
wheelchair, like, I want to say LeGrand, but they may not be there now,
Oh.
but they're over there somewhere.
So, did she get in a wreck? Is that what happened?
Yes.
That's what I was
She was like 20-some years old.
Yeah, I know she wasn't
40 years ago.
that old.
Had 2 kids. Got in that wreck and paralyzed from then on. In fact, she's done really well. Usually people with her condition, they don't live in their 60s. And
Now is she paralyzed from?
she basically, from the waist down, like somewhere in the midsection somewhere, and I don't know. She had a lot of problems over the years. But she's doing, all things considered, pretty good.
I can move if you need somebody to
Oh,
sit.
you, yeah, we're okay. All right, we'll get that one.
I have no idea what time it is. Oh, it's 5:02. So what have you been up to?
Oh, I retired as an electrician. I went to the Ben Lapine School District when I got laid off out here.
Mhm.
And I worked over there for 17 and a half years. And then my wife and Parlo Leyte, I don't know if you remember Harvey Leyte.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
she is their, Harvey and Jess's sister, and we had her mom living with us, and she says, I'm gonna have to stay home and start taking care of mom, because she can't take care of herself. And I said, well, we can't really live in Bend and make the house payment without you working, because it just, my job didn't pay that
Oh,
great.
Ben's horrible.
Yeah, and I didn't like Bend anyway.
No.
And I said, I want to come back to Burns. I said, I'd rather be retiring Burns than Bend. And I said, as a matter of fact, I go, if I was going to pick a place to die, it wouldn't be Bend. So I said, let's find something in Burns. And we ended up buying the house I grew up in from my mom.
Need more room?
I can move over.
We can move lots here.
Yeah, here, sit down there. So we ended up buying the house I grew up in, and
Karen's gonna come.
Oh,
Yeah.
just retired.
Yeah.
When I worked there for a few more years and then retired there and came home.
I lived in Bend.
Did you?
After Hines shut down,
Uh-huh,
you know, because first it was plywood,
yeah,
and then, you know, all that pickup stuff, and then they finally all shut down, and I moved to Bend. And, you know, it only had like 16,000 people. It was actually not bad. I mean, even then, the streets couldn't handle the traffic.
right, yeah, it's already overflowing.
But it was pretty nice back then. Lapine had like 1,500 people
Yeah.
in the Grand. Bend had like 16,000. This is actually a pretty nice place. You know, places that are just like urban now are like a mile out of town.
Yeah.
Wasn't that restaurant there, just there by there was a restaurant that had gals on roller skates that,
Or Danny's, or the Pilot Butte Inn.
yeah,
Pilot Butte Inn,
Yeah.
Started out as an A&W.
yeah.
Yep, that it did.
Yeah, I was just stunned, I thought, what, this is cool. But we came from Astoria, like golf time,
We were invited the whole church today.
What's that?
I invited the whole church today.
Good. Excellent.
I did.
So, yeah, I don't know who all's gonna show up, but I wanna give them a chance. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there was a lot of publicity went out. It just all depends on who.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We'll see.
Thanks for coming.
Huh?
Thanks for coming.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
The man of the hour.
I gotta admit, that just came out of the blue. I mean, that was just like when you
Am I stalking
mentioned
you?
it, when you mentioned that about, you know, going to the library and stuff, I was like, I hadn't even thought of that.
I
Oh,
thought,
really?
I thought maybe Bonnie Vogler might have got a hold of you and prodded you into it.
No, actually, I've just, because I know she has that read, go, write, go, whatever it is, you know, that email
But
stuff,
she
and she
didn't
was
know-
just doing all this.
Yeah,
And then she'd said that, you know, she told me that, you know, she really liked having an author, you know, and so I thought, well, you'd like this, and once I had this flyer and stuff like that, here, you might get a kick
Yeah.
out of this.
I was glad.
And
to see-
immediately she sent it out to everybody in Burton, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, because I told her that you were an author. I said, I haven't
That's what she
seen
said.
Leroy forever, but I go, I get, well, I said, I know he's an author because I saw his books on Amazon after I found him. And she goes, well, that is cool.
Yeah, she's into the reading and writing thing, so that was pretty good.
You know, I've gotten away from reading books and I need to get back into it, and it's because of this crap.
No,
You can listen to books.
I know it, but I would rather read them.
yeah.
I get more immersed into reading than I can listen.
You know, I don't much care for that either. I'd rather read than listen to an audio book, because I got bad hearing anyway,
Same with me.
but.
I
No,
think
I was an electrician.
Were you?
I was a craft electrician.
In the Navy? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did you work on all of them or a particular
A
one?
lot of them. I worked on A6s and well, the first few years I worked in intermediate level. I was
Thank
electronics
you,
off
Linda,
all of
for
them.
Uh-huh.
And
being the
a lot of these
analyst for
different
them.
systems. And then I went into a squadron that was an A6 squadron. And then I went to an EA6B squadron. Then I went to China Lake and I was running
author today because
the electric shop there.
his
which
name
is,
is
you know,
the same
Naval
as one of
Weapons
the
Center.
guys
Uh-huh.
in Good
I was
and they have the wrong guy.
in charge of the electric shop, and we had
So I
like
emailed him
22
and said, I
different
don't know how
aircraft.
to fix
Because
this,
it's
but
weapons
Nice.
center.
You
We
know,
had all these
it's so
trainers and
I
stuff.
was
It was
thinking, 'cause he
amazing.
goes to
I mean, they did
schools and
stuff,
stuff.
you know, I was knee deep, I mean, nose deep in all this.
But it was interesting.
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah,
had
we did that
full-scale
with the,
aerial targets.
the
You
Lotus
literally, you
program.
know what those are?
Like
I think
the
I did.
They,
Lotus
they
program, we
take
had the
F4,
projector in here,
F86,
and
I mean, they had people flying
it worked out
F86
pretty well.
around
Because I
stuff.
think a lot of kids would be
And
interested
then what
'cause
you
it's
do is
about
take the
hunting,
seats
Oh,
out,
like
put this
you know,
electronics
catfish
package
and
in,
stuff
and
like
then
his
someone
books
in
and
this
hunting
control
critters.
room, and they
Yeah,
had
that's the
screens
demo
so you
here
could
for
see
sure.
everything just like it's flying, would take off.
Okay.
This is where we're.
Uh,
Yeah, come on in.
You know, nobody in the airplane, they're flying from this
Remote
remote
control.
control, and you're out there launching
You're
this
good.
airplane.
I
and
checked.
nobody in the pilot seat, they fly around, they shoot missiles at it, so.
If I lean forward,
They
I'm
do
just
all
like
kinds of
in the
stuff
whole
there, so
frame.
that was pretty tricky, but yeah, I did, worked on a lot of aircraft, helicopters, aircraft, and I was in Sicily, me and
So
Nolan
you're
were
gonna
there
write
at the same time.
Oh, were you?
Joy with the Roy
And I was
song.
in the electric shop
I
there,
like
we would work on a lot of
you
things
have
that
a
came
lot
in,
of
we would work on some
content.
Russian aircraft, and British aircraft, and French, and because I
And,
was next level, I wasn't organizational, which is
59
aircraft
pages.
itself, you're working on parts.
I'm right here.
By the
Yeah.
time you've been in a
That's
few
good.
years, you've been
Yeah.
doing that stuff, it's like, it don't matter, it comes in, if they
The
got a book,
writer's
you
group
fix
has
it.
been very
That's
You
interesting.
know, if you got the test here and the manual, that's all you care.
Yeah.
Had a writer's.
But yeah, and then I was
Were you writing
auto
fiction or
electrician
nonfiction?
in,
No, it'd be nonfiction.
G, Springfield.
I don't know what
So
happened.
then I came back here.
Too busy.
I remember you wanted to start a blog,
Someone just
like
left that for you.
back when you were in the courthouse.
You see
Back.
Norman?
What's that?
Do you still see Norman?
Oh, yeah, in fact,
Came
he,
to writer's group.
today's his birthday.
Oh, is it?
And he's gonna be here next
It
week.
fell apart for a little bit and came back together.
From
Yeah, I
Peg.
think sometimes there's like waves.
Oh, yeah.
And like you have to have like the right dynamic and
Yep.
I'm lucky right now.
Tell her I really appreciate that. So. Well, I'd say at 6 o'clock, I suppose I ought to get going, huh?
Yeah.
Anybody comes in, they'll be running late.
There are a couple people that are coming.
I would
every
like
week,
a
but-
glass of water,
Oh, I would be happy to follow with that.
'cause I'm sure I'll get dry before it's over.
Yeah, so Ralph and Ralph Dickinson are both
What's that?
coming. Ralph and Ralph are coming, Ralph Dickinson and
Oh,
his son
really?
Ralph.
Are you?
Well, Ralph, I don't know what you call him, but yeah, they're supposed to come in here. So,
Well, maybe I'll hold off just a second, then if they're gonna show up. I have to have all these, because I'm gonna be reading excerpts and this and that, and
that's awesome.
I'm assuming this will be safe here.
I don't know, I might steal it.
How about,
Here you go.
I kinda sit right here on, I wanna sit on the end, move this just a hair maybe, kinda. And then everybody can shift to where. Thank you. See, cheat sheets, so I wouldn't get, go rambling on about stuff.
Hi, Leroy.
Hey, Artie,
Good, man.
how you doing, brother?
Good. See, I answer your question.
Sure.
How you doing?
Okay, now I need to see if my head's in the way.
Coming back in? Yeah, let's sit right over there. Okay. Well, Artie's here. We've known each other a long time. Well, you know that. Is it running?
It is.
So I can start anytime.
Yeah, I leave it running when I set it up because I don't want to forget to actually
Alright.
start it.
Well,
Hello, everyone.
thank you, guys. It'd be nice if 40 other people showed up, but this is nice and intimate.
Next time?
Hmm.
Next time?
Maybe.
Maybe at Cannes,
What's that?
maybe at the film festival.
Yeah, maybe. All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, I appreciate this.
Thank you for coming.
I am going to start with a poem. I think I'm a hopeless romantic fool. I feel like it's an endless ride down a whirlpool. You never have to land, just always gliding along, being rushed around the sleek walls of green while those outside watch you careen. And I dream and hope that the next love will be the truest, a port from the stormy, love-tossed seas of the past, a haven for a shipwrecked sailor who wants the open sea no more, just to get to shore. Don't want where I've been before, just want to get to shore. That poem is significant to me several different ways. It was published in 1998. That was my very first publication of anything ever, except technical manuals and stuff like that. This was supposed to be my first published book. And I'm going to get into a backstory on that before I get into some of the other stuff. And it'll kind of explain another reason why that poem is so significant to me. This book was supposed to have been published in 95, or early 96, I should say. So I'm going to tell you the backstory on this. It's going to take a minute, but please bear with me. It does have bearing. Explains why I self-publish and was why that poem came into being. I came out of a particularly troubled time. Hey, Don, glad to see you. Welcome, brother. If I missed
Hey,
anybody-
Don. You started. Nice to see you.
Anyway, it was a difficult time, and pretty much all my life had collapsed. You know, marriage, my career, everything was up for grabs, but I was writing this. And this story, I first had the idea in high school. In fact, my friend Norm occasionally remarks that I remember you talking about it in high school. And over the years, he would bring up, hey, have you ever done anything? You ought to write that. And I would think about it, and the concept is the same, even though it's a lot different now than when I first thought it, and even wrote down some stuff about it. Well, I decided I was going to write it. So I ended up, after everything had collapsed, in Eugene for a couple of years. And I had went from a very good paying job, and my marriage was over, and everything was difficult. But I had this. And so that's what I keyed on. That's what I paid attention to. I didn't do every minute, but I was steady. I was keeping at it, writing here and writing there. And it was a low-paying job. It was surviving, but it was enough to be able to do stuff and write. Well, after a couple of years, it got to the point where it was almost done. I mean, I was probably 3/4 of the way done or better. It was like, you need to start thinking about publishers. So I started looking around for publishers. And I won't get into that too much, but it's a dog-eat-dog world. Publishing is difficult. But in early '95, I got a publisher. Now, they weren't the biggest, but they were well-known, reputable. They had a lot of authors, and they were supplying books to Barnes & Nobles and all these other people. They were reputable. People knew them. And finally, in the middle of '95, the idea was I had this plan, because I had no plan. I was doing this, but where I was going, I had no idea. Yeah, everything had collapsed, and this was the only thing left. And it was like, this was the first glimmer. Well, I know what I'll do. Talking to people, and people heard what I was doing, and they would bring up suggestions. The plan was I would move back here to Burns, move in with my grandfather. My grandmother had died like 3 years before, and my grandfather was legally blind and deaf. So my mom lived close to him, but this would move in and to help me get established back in Burns and take care of him, and he loved to travel. And so while I'm doing this book, it's coming toward the end, he wanted to travel, and so he wanted to go to the Southwest. Well, the setting of this book is the Navajo Nation. And so I was able to go down, take him to see his brother in Arizona, and I got to go to the nation, Navajo Nation, and see the landscape, so it made it more accurate for the setting of the book. And I was able to talk to the director of the Navajo Museum, which is a pretty good museum. He was a PhD, a doctorate in something, I don't know what, but he had a PhD, and so he was able to relate, and he was Navajo, it didn't throw him that it was aliens and Indians. It didn't bug him. He was actually pretty open to the idea. And to top it all off, he was a very well thought of medicine man. So he was able to give me insight into the ceremonies I have in here, and things that most people wouldn't know, little details that he gave me. And it helped me, he helped me figure out a way to combine the Navajo crystal gazing ceremony with the Lakota vision quest, which has never been done. I mean, the Indians didn't do that, but I was able to combine it in here. And he actually heard me out and made some suggestions, and it turned out really good. So I did that, and I came back, and the whole idea was I was going to finish this book, get it sent off to the publisher, and do that through, and when the book was done, go to work as an auto electrician at Tiggs. They were waiting for me. It was like several dollars an hour more money. So I was pretty jazzed. This was like the first step. My life was coming back together. This plan was working. So I finally got it done. I sent the manuscript off, and there was a return of editorial requests, and basically demands, but still they couched it in question, please do this. So I did that, and it came down to late '95. They had the last revised manuscript, and I was just waiting for their final okay. They had the cover in mind. All I was waiting for was that final manuscript release, and for me to okay the cover, that they sent it to me, they said the book would be out in the spring of '96 in about 3 months. Good, cool. So I went to work at Tiggs and I'm going on. Well, time passed. In the meantime, I'm writing the next book, Western. Working on that, because, why wait until this is out? Why write the next one? And I was even dabbling in Light of Dark Candle. So I waited. About 3 months later, I still haven't heard anything. 4 months later. I don't know how long it was. I started calling, sending letters. No answer. No one would answer the phone. The phone didn't even work. What is going on? And I can't tell you. In fact, I finished Western. It took several months. And it was a long time. I can't tell you exactly how long it was or how I found out about it. But what happened was, in that 3-month period that I was waiting, they said the book would come out. One Monday morning, the employees showed up, doors were locked. The locks had been changed, nobody could get in, nobody knew what happened. And it took a long time to finally find out what had happened. Was this publishing company was owned by 2 brothers. And they took off with over $10 million and left 1,700 authors in the lurch. They still owe me money. So anyway, that was it. It was the final straw. It was like my whole life collapsed. There was nothing else really. I had the job, but every bit of plan, everything I had looked at, where I was trying to go, I had no path. And I kind of got cold. I kind of got bitter, withdrawn. I mean, I lived my life. A lot of people didn't know just how bad it was, but inside I was cold. I mean, I was withdrawn. There just was nothing there much left to work with. Very bad time. So Maelstrom, this poem that I read, was when I finally started falling out. It was the first hint that I was going to come out of it. I am a romantic fool, I admit that. But I have learned, and that, what it says there is true. You just don't have to operate on every romantic impulse you get. That just doesn't work out too good, I've learned. But anyway, so that poem reveals me starting to wake up again. That, yeah, I do have some hope. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing, but at least I'm not where I was. And that's what that poem signifies to me, that, hey, you're able to start revealing yourself again, your true self. Because I had clamped down. People didn't see the real me inside. There was nobody. My sister noticed I was having a lot of problems, but she didn't know exactly what was going on in there. So that was really important. I was able to start revealing myself. It's my belief, and what I see, every writer reveals something of themselves, no matter what they write. Doesn't matter whether it's technical, you show how proficient you are. Doesn't matter if it's porn. That shows that you're doing whatever it is to make money, or what excites you, or whatever it is. Everybody somewhere, if you write, there is some little bit of yourself, being revealed. My cousin Joanne called me last year. My dad died night before Thanksgiving last year. And a few days after that, my cousin Joanne called me, condolences, and we got to talking, and she said, I've written a book. Really? Because, she was talking to me about writing and this and that. She knew I'd written all these books. Really? And she goes, yeah, I'm really nervous. She goes, it might reveal too much about me. Well, I can understand a little bit of that. It's more autobiographical. It's about her being in a wheelchair and her spiritual journey and her perseverance and what she's went through. And it's targeted for younger kids. But we got to talking about that, and I realized if you write something, it's going to reveal something about you, one way or another. And I'd like to share this too. This is a 1-copy edition. This is a commemorative edition for my dad. Commemorative edition for Richard L. Thissell on the occasion of your 90th birthday. And I'll get into that later. I hope you enjoy this story, Dad. I wrote these books just for you. There's much of you and much of me in Blaine Cresswell. He had a rough 10 years, but it does end well. And that is true. Every character that I write has something of me in them. Every character has much of the people I know. all my years. That's where my characters come from, human nature, human reactions. I remember things like that. So that is what I believe. And you know, we do what we believe. If you do something, it means you believe something, or you wouldn't do it. We are what we believe. Where is this? Anyway, Joanne's book is called Uphill is Hard, but Downhill I Fly. And I haven't read it yet, but I've already heard that it's pretty good. Pretty good. Well, I'd like to read a little bit out of Ride the Wild Wind. Now the situation is, because this is toward the end of the series, there's this one empire, and it's almost collapsed. The fight has come clear down to the home planet. Huge empire, and it's the two factions are right at the home planet. Almost neither one can't hardly defend, the other can't hardly take it over. That's all that's left of this whole empire. And there were two spies in their ruling council, and they were discovered. And this one guy followed them, and when he had proof and he had witnesses, they killed him. And that's where I'm going to take up, is when they just got killed. And this is Inca. His name is Inca. This is the one that was the ruler. Justice, he said. He looked at the conflict under. I fear that this will be a small consolation when chaos arrives. Inca left the two conflicts to deal with the bodies. He made his way to Ina's chambers and told her of what had transpired. When finished hearing his description, she walked to a window overlooking the royal garden. He joined her there. Well, she said, at least that is accomplished. Do we have much hope? Asked Inca quietly, or will we finally succumb? Ina laid her upper on his shoulder. I personally believe that there is no hope. I wouldn't share this with anyone but you. Inca patted her hand. I understand. He stared at a gardener below, trimming a small shrub. Look at Bank. Even if he knew that tomorrow the world would explode, today he would still tend his garden. He looked at Ina. He is the wisest person I've ever known. We must follow his example. Ina sighed. At the end, what else can we do? She clamped her ears. Assemble the council. They must be told the truth. We have work to do. She stared at Bank. For him, if nothing else. I don't know if anybody recognizes that, but that is almost plagiarism from a quote by Martin Luther. Now, there is some controversy that Martin Luther did not actually say this, but almost everybody says he did. So I'll just say that Martin Luther did. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. I stole that. I admit it. It fit so well, and I didn't think Martin Luther would really have an issue. It's been 400 or 500 years or longer, so hundreds of years. I'm not ashamed of stuff like that. It fit. It fit those people in the situation, and so I used it. He was being true, and that's my character, was being true to who and what he was. He believed that this garden needed tended, and that's what he did, and he was going to do it no matter what. Shakespeare in Hamlet, character Polonius said, "To thine own self be true." A lot of people have talked about what they think that means. And there's a lot of truth behind what people say. To me, it means exactly that. You will do what you are. If it wasn't who and what you are, you wouldn't do it. You'd do something else. And that, he ended up being a hypocrite, of course. He gave that advice and then didn't follow it, which showed the truth of who and what he was, that he didn't really believe that. He was true to his self. My character development is based on that. When I have a story, a book, the setting, whether it's science fiction or Western or fantasy, that concept, and of course I can modify because I'm the author. I can go back and change stuff all I want. But when it's finally done, that story will be true to its setting. You're not going to have this set up and then someone else gets to do something later on, contradicts the whole setting of the story. And the characters are the same way. They will be true as best I can to what they are. That doesn't mean doesn't have contrast. They will have multifacets. I don't like having paper cutter characters. I mean, I would rather not have one than just some blank nothing character. I haven't finished this one yet. This is a book called Fan of Dark Flame. It's the second in the Wizard Soul series, one after Light a Dark Candle. So I'm going to read this and then, share some out of Light and Los Pinos. So Dark Flame. The situation here is at the first of the book. A young pregnant woman, she's pretty close to giving birth, and a girl, her sister-in-law, are kidnapped. And they're taken away by these bad guys, and it's been rough. It's horse riding and up trails and stuff. I mean, they can hardly make it. It's been really, really bad. And 3 men walked ahead of them. This is the 2 women. Monge, the leader, was in front. Behind him was Prang and Brode. Behind the women walked and watched the most terrifying of the 4 remaining kidnappers, Juoth. Hattie had vomited from shock and horror when he had brutally smashed the wounded 5th man to death, laughing gleefully as the severely injured man pleaded and begged while his life was slowly beaten away. Moll had cried and hit her face against Hattie, trying to block out the screams with her hands. Both quickly understood that the only reason that they were alive was the thoughts of these men, that they might realize a hefty profit. Hattie tried to comfort Moll and keep the young girl from dwelling on the terror that they were experiencing. But now she needed to rely on Moll, who had assumed a guardian role over Hattie. The young girl was now gone forever, replaced by a young woman of strength and determination. Over the next couple days, I'm skipping about 2 days here, where they finally get to where they're going. It's over a lot of rough terrain and up trails, and it's been horrible for this woman and this young girl. And they're right at the end now. They're going up the last rim to where they're going to stop. Clace led the way, followed by the rest of the band. Monge was directly behind the struggling women. Behind him, again bringing up the rear, was Juoth, the almost subhuman brute. He stopped and looked back down the trail when he topped the rim. His eyes flew open. "Hey, Monge," he called out, "there's someone standing down there." "Where?" "Right over there, just inside the trees." Juoth pointed to a spot where the trail emerged from the forest far below. "He's just standing there, watching us." Monge peered over the rim and spied the man standing in plain sight and looking straight up at them. A chill shivered up his back when he saw a second man, tall and thin, step out to join the first. He breathed a groan, almost a sob. "What, Monge? Who is that?" Juoth turned his head and looked at his leader, confusion furrowing his brow as he heard the desperation in the quiet moan. "That's Trant." And I'm going to skip again, and they go through where they start arguing, and there's a big struggle, and finally they run. They just leave the girls and run, and when they're approaching the trees, men step out, and they tell them, "Drop your weapons." And they all come to a stop. "What do we do, Monge? What do we do?" Juoth's plaintive cry went unheeded. What I did with him was he was a subhuman brute. He was horrible. He was probably at least lightly retarded, almost innocent and childlike in his way as far as how he would deal. He didn't know how to deal with stuff. He was a tool. So I tried to present that he was brutal. He didn't care nothing about beating someone to death, but he almost had a childlike attitude towards, what do we do? What do we do? He didn't have no clue what to do. So, to the next one. I'm kind of enjoying this, guys. Very seldom do I get a talk for any length of time.
That's cool. I like what you did with that character.
Thank you.
About there's a passionate to it, almost like I remember in Star Wars where Luke went down into this place and this creature came out and he ended up crushing its skull, and its keeper was just, "Oh my gosh," and you almost felt sorry for
Oh, I
the
know.
guy, even though he had this creature that ate people.
Yep.
It's really cool.
Thank you. Now here's another example of, it was a conscious decision. I actually worked at some of this quite a bit. Sometimes it comes easy and sometimes you have to go back and redo and go between a couple places. This is and light a dark candle. And there's a mage, pretty powerful, named Welia. She is a hunter. She's predatory. She hunts other mages, other magicians. And she's pretty cold-blooded about it, pretty ruthless. She doesn't care anything about it other than getting her power. She's all about getting power. And she may have some acquaintances here and there, but for this part, I'm not sure where to start here. Well, they're sitting next to each other. They've just come to, she's been toying with him, this fake deal. That's what got him there in the first place. She lured him in. And so now they're sitting down, and she has in fear that they might do more than just have a deal. That it might be something physical go on. And that's where I'll take it up. As Errol's thoughts focused completely on the pleasure, Welia held back for one instant of anticipation, with a small touch of regret for not being able to continue with this physical encounter. Welia sprang the trap. She released the barricade that had held his searching power at a certain boundary, causing his soul strength to surge into hers. Errol's eyes flew open as her full being and purpose was open to him. She locked her gaze on his as his power began to drain away into her. He began to resist, but could not muster the strength to pull away, physically or mentally. The full measure of her deception flared through his mind. Welia began to laugh against his lips as his eyes became vague with approaching death. He gave one last feeble twist from the very depths of his secret self, trying to hold one final wisp of consciousness, and then was gone. She held him for a few brief moments, savoring the culmination and the peak of the kill. She finally relaxed her grip and let Errol's body slump back, falling sideways onto the settee. It was now wizened with Errol's true age. She closed her eyes and breathed her way to calmness. She was ruthless. I made her ruthless, and there's other parts in the book that I'm not going to spoil, bring up. She is. She's ruthless. She's all about power. She's about, and she has developed this. She doesn't want just anybody's power. She wants these seasoned wizards. She wants their full power. She is good. She's a hunter, and that's what she lives for. Well, this is another episode where she had set up another hunt and been pretty involved. And when they finally meet, that's where I'm going to start. This is, they're on an island. She has two companions. And where is it? Kelly is the name of this wizard that's meeting her there. So they step out onto the sand. Please bring your companions. They do not alarm me. The speaker was a small, hawkish-looking woman, older in appearance than Welia would have expected. She exuded strength and cruelty, haughty disdain evident on her face and in every move of her body. Welia turned slightly and waved for Jaren and Brayton to join her. As she entered the shelter, she noticed the malicious glee sparkling in Kellad's eyes and the satisfaction playing on her lips. Alarm slammed inside as Welia realized that Kellad wasn't even trying to keep up a pretense. Well, here we all are. Kellad. Welia nodded in greeting, her eyes hooded, apprehension coursing like fire, deep inside. I'm going to jump over the fight. It turns out to be a fight, and when things are very desperate, this Kellad, all of a sudden, out of survival, something else is going, has to just go, and she leaves. She has to go right then and there, and I'm going to take up at the very end, because it was almost over. Welia was almost dead. Welia collapsed, sobbing from shock, weakness, and pain. She sat, one arm outstretched and her head down, gasping. After a minute or so, she was able to sit up. When she saw Jaren curled in a fetal position, moaning and twitching, she scurried to his side. I will explain that he got caught in the blast. He was not a wizard, but he got caught in some of this power of the blast, and it just dropped him. Jaren! She took hold of his hands, still clutching his head, and pulled them down. He stared, slack-jawed, unseen. Drool coursed down the side of his mouth, his face twitching. Welia slowly eased a tendril of sensing into him as she recognized the irreversible damage. She settled calm into him and blocked the pain. He relaxed but remained unknowing, eyes blank. Tears slipped down Welia's cheek as she held him, slackened unresponsive, to her chest. After a few minutes, Welia recovered enough to walk to the edge of the sand. So this ruthless woman, this absolute nothing but power, was really torn up and devastated by the loss of this one guy, who's a friend of hers. And I tried to give her that human element, that she wasn't nobody's a complete monster, nobody's a complete angel. And so I tried to describe that in these books. So anyways, I'm developing these characters. What I do in my writing style, it's just me. It's what I am. Like I said, I'm true to what they are. When I get an idea for a character, I explore it, I start developing that character, and the book helped describe the character, but the characters I'm developing help describe where the book's going. They work together. It's a harmony. You know, one gets the other going. And I got to admit, it works pretty good sometimes, but sometimes I get surprised because I'm in the flow, I'm writing, and all of a sudden something will happen. You'd be like, I didn't mean to do that. And case in point here, this was the first time I really got caught that way. Really. Now this is a case where they are running and fighting, trying to get to a place where they can get to some hovers and escape this base that they're fighting. This was before they finally was able to escape Earth. So they're running, and they haven't seen any enemy for a while. Almost an hour had passed before Brian suddenly tapped Gene on the shoulder. They had just turned into a narrow Y-shaped intersection from the left arm corridor. I know where the spaceship hangar is, said Brian, grinning. From there I can get us to the hover hangar in less than 10 minutes. Gene and Amy were the only ones close enough to hear it. Both broke out with huge smiles. This was the first indication in a long while, tenuous as it was, that they might reach safety. Gene motioned the others up and relayed the information. He was especially gratified to see Billy loosen his tight-lipped grimace into a small smile. After a short rest period, they moved on. Brian was walking, even with Gene now, pointing the way at every intersection. The rest were closer together, pacing tiredly, but with a fresh spring to their step. Red kept on alert watch to the rear with Maria close beside, renewed vigor in his posture. At a right-angled three-way intersection, Brian turned his head to the rear and exclaimed loud enough for all to hear, "A couple more minutes, we're almost there." Red turned his head to Maria and smiled. As she lifted her face to respond, a searing beam tore past Red and burned a wide hole through her chest. Maria toppled straight back, still smiling up at Red, as she hit the floor dead. When I wrote that, I stopped and said, I just killed Marie. I had plans for her later on in the series. I was like, wow, what did you just do? And then I was faced with, okay, what do you do? Are you going to rewrite this whole thing? That was flowing. I mean, I remember the moment when I did it. I was writing, and it just came out, and I was like, whoa. I actually had to sit there for 7 minutes when I just killed Marie. What am I going to do with this? And I finally decided that under the circumstances, and I had a glimmer of what Red would do later on, I said, oh, I'll keep it. I'll keep this. And it was certainly not conscious on my part. It just came out. Some kind of creative bauble, I guess, but it worked. So anyway, yeah, that happens. And here's another one. This caught me by surprise too, because I certainly didn't plan this one until I got going on it, and then it was like, well, it couldn't have been anything else. Oops, that's not the one. Excuse me, wrong book. This is out of Los Pinos, Western. This is after a place where the good guys had been ambushed. There was only 4 guys left. And they were running. They were running full out. That they even got out was a miracle. And they were all shot up. I mean, it was amazing. They even stayed in the saddle except for one guy. A guy named Randy. And he had been creased a time or two, but he was the only one who really hadn't got shot bad. And this is about right after they escaped and all the bad guys. There's a lot of them. They're getting on their horses and they're coming after them, and they really don't have much chance. And this takes off right when they were heading out. He leaped his horse next to the others and lashed out with his rein ends. This is Randy, causing the horses to jump ahead and explode into a frantic all-out run. As they tore through the gunfire, Shorty was hit yet again and fell to the rocky ground. Eric and Tom, one on each side, kept Blaine in the saddle despite their own distress. Another bullet raked its way across the side of Tom's neck. Eric's horse stumbled as the bullet sliced through its right haunch. It recovered and increased its speed. Randy, unscathed except for the thin lines across his hand and his brow, quickly reloaded as they raced through the pass. He was slightly behind the others and saw that none of them could keep this pace up for long. Their wounds were just too great. He saw blood running from every horse, could only wonder that any of them, horses or men, were still alive. Two men raised up as the fleeing riders neared the end of the pass and lifted their rifles. Randy spurred his horse unmercifully and drew even with his friends. He shot the man on his left before he could shoot. The other man was able to get off a round which ripped along Joe's, which was Blaine's horse, left shoulder and Blaine's inner thigh. Joe stumbled and then regained his stride. Randy shot the man down as he was levering another cartridge in. They flew through the last of the narrow pass, and then they were out into more open terrain, their horses running as if the devil himself were after them. Randy twisted his head around and saw men running up to their horses. He looked ahead at his friends and saw that they had very little strength left and knew that both men and horses could not last much longer. All for one and one for all, he thought. Well, boys, this one's for you. Randy pulled his horse even with the others and leaned close to Eric. You boys will never make it, he shouted. Eric and Tom stared at him as Blaine flopped around almost unconscious and only staying in the saddle because of their steadying hands. Blaine, yelled Randy. Blaine weakly lifted his head and they locked eyes. Adios, partner. Randy pulled his horse into a tight circle, spraying sand and rocks as he turned and headed back toward the pass. He reloaded his pistol, holstered it, and then pulled his rifle from its scabbard. He shifted it to his left hand along with the reins, and then again palmed his pistol. Even as their horses jumped and twisted across the rocky terrain, the three wounded men stared back as Randy seemed to fly as he charged the ambushers. Blaine could only watch with horror as his friend raced toward certain death. Now, I'm not going to read how they ended up him dying. My plan was he was going to go in there, hole up, and they were going to leave him, but gave him enough time. He died. And once again, and it was one of the protagonists that was like in charge of that whole thing, and again, I stopped and went, oh, I just killed Randy. He had things to do. But it worked out. So I'm glad. So yeah, when you're riding like this, if something comes up, don't just dismiss it. Don't just change it and go back to what you originally planned. You gotta be flexible in this riding stuff. So my inspiration, people ask sometimes, where do you get these ideas? How do you come up with this stuff? Authors always get that. Photographers, musicians, we all get this stuff. Where do you come up with these ideas? And it's not, I don't know how to word it. It's creativity. It's everybody's creative. You do a recipe, you make a jig for woodworking, some new invention, whatever it is, doesn't matter. If it's something new, if you're changing a recipe to suit, it's creativity. And some people are creative in one place, some are another. Mine is this, and I've always had an active imagination, which has been difficult sometimes. Sometimes it's good. At least in this stuff, it actually works. A lot of what if. A lot of my stories, ideas come from what if. And as the stories are being developed, I got an outline, I got an idea, but I let these books, and like obviously the characters, I let them develop themselves. As long as I have that base philosophy of be true to the story, be true to the character, be true to itself, I let them just kind of go. You can always come back and change it if you don't like it. What if? One perfect example is Light a Dark Candle. This series, it's only one, but it might even be my longest series at the time I'm done. I had the idea for that one day when it was what if, it was just an idle thinking about. I don't know how many people are very familiar with the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II, is where Hitler's forces, that was as far as they ever got. And the Russian forces would not give up that last little bit on that side of the river, and it was horrible. so many dead people and everything, but they ended up holding it off. I got to thinking, what if there was more than just not wanting to, what if there's something there? Hitler knew it was there, and Stalin knew there was something there. Something besides what they're just talking about, you know, we're just not going to give this land up. What if there was something there? And it led to this story. What if? What if there's something? And so this whole series, start to finish, it's fantasy, all right. But the concept was the Battle of Stalingrad. What if? What if there was something else? And it turned into a magic-based fantasy series of all things. I was kind of surprised, but hey, I kept it. What else here? All right, how do I keep ideas? And it has worked really good for me, and I got one really good example. When I get an idea, I write it down. And I will not just write it down. I'll write down enough so I can remember it later on. I'll write a chapter, sometimes even 2 or 3, or a very detailed summary or an outline, something that will, if I go to it years later, I can look at that and I'll remember what it was. Now, I wrote these books, these 5 science fiction and fantasy books, and I had ideas for Westerns, quite a few of them actually. I couldn't tell you how many ideas. I couldn't write all the ideas, books I got the rest of my life. Got a lot of them, which is good. It gives me a good pile to go through. But anyway, I wrote those, and my dad, he is not a science fiction fantasy reader. He wasn't. He tried. My mom one day, and I was already toying with it. You know, maybe I'd like to write a Western. But I hadn't said anything to anybody. One day my mom said, you know, your dad tried to read your stuff and he just couldn't do it. It's just not him. He just couldn't do it. Well, it didn't surprise me, you know, it didn't hold it against him. Like, yeah, I understand. That's just who he is. And right about that time, in fact, it had been a couple days before, so it was really interesting how this turned out, that I had run across this summary, and it was enough for me to know what was going on, and it was the only thing out of all my ideas and all the stuff I ever wrote, I did not remember. I had no clue that I'd written this thing down. And yet it's my handwriting, and it's in my pile of stuff, my man, it was like, where did that come from? But it's me, and it is the only thing I ever wrote down. I do not remember whatsoever. And I thought, I'll write that for Dad. I'll write a Western for Dad. And so I started writing Trail of Lost Hope. Then, you know, it was enough to really get going. And as I started writing it, I got to a point where Blaine is talking about what led him to be there and what was going on. And I stopped and said, you know, that's a whole nother book. So I stopped. I stopped writing Trail of Lost Hope and wrote Los Pinos, which is a precursor to this, and all because he was explaining where he had gotten where he was, and it was so good, I was just like, well, I got to make a book out of that. And so I went back and I wrote Los Pinos. And then this happens about 10 years after that. And so that worked out really good. That method of storing stories and ideas worked out really good. Long list, given enough so that later on I can go back and know what I was talking about. So it worked out really good. Anyway, that's why I wrote Westerns for my dad. And I know that people talk about don't change genres, but I never was much for that, because that's one of the pros of self-publishing. You can write whatever you want. Speaking of which, clear back to this thing with Earth, that's why I self-publish. My confidence for the conventional publishing is almost 0. After that happened, and I'll go on a side trip here real quick. I went years without writing hardly at all. I'd finished Earth, and that had happened. Westra and Light a Dark Candle, and I didn't write. I wrote a lot of songs, as Tom knows, and you know, we've written a lot of songs, but I didn't really do much writing. I'd write ideas down, but I just really had no idea, because I didn't trust publishers. I wasn't going to go conventional publishing there. My sister, several years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, said one day, I was talking about that, she asked me about it. She goes, why don't you publish on Amazon? What? What's that all about? I got to looking, and sure enough, you could self-publish on Amazon. And I got started on that, and it was quite a chore, because it was all me. I mean, there's a lot of tutorials and stuff like that, but I did it myself, and that's a very good thing. You can do it yourself, and you set the pace. The only thing I did on the first 5 books was I contracted the covers out. That was it. The next 2 I did myself, you know, and you kind of see the difference. And some of the cons are just exactly that. You're doing it all yourself. But that's where I didn't much get into it, but that's me. This is who I am. I don't much do committee. I don't go to writers groups and stuff like that. But I know that they can be very effective. People should do that if that's where it helps you hone your talents or your skills or all these other things. Then you should do that. And don't be scared to adapt an idea. These 2 books, this Los Pinos, at the very end, there's 3 guys. I wasn't going to read this, but I'm going to do this. At the very end of the book, there's three left. Blaine, Eric, and Tom. And they finally said goodbye to this town and left. They rode out early the next morning, a slight frost coloring the grass. They rode out to a junction just north of town and sat there for a moment, savoring the new day. Well, boys, said Blaine, I guess this is it. I'll be heading that way. He pointed right toward Tamichi Creek. I'm going to Santa Fe to start. After that, I don't know, maybe Sonora way. You sure you can let that gal go? Tom's question caught both Eric and Blaine by surprise. You might not ever find another like her. Blaine nodded his head. Yep, Tom, I know you know how it is. Well, then I guess I'll cross over here and head west. Eric held out his hand. I'll be heading north from here. He shook Blaine's hand and then gripped Tom's. Brothers, if either of you ever need me, spread the word and I'll come running. Blaine dropped his hand on top of theirs. Goes for me too. Tom nodded. Same here. They sat and looked at each other for a moment, then Eric turned his horse and started up the road. Tom nodded at Blaine and turned his horse toward the river. Blaine watched them both go and then turned Joe's head to the right. All right, buddy, he said softly. Let's go see what's over the next hill. 10 years later was Trail of Lost Hope, and it resolves Blaine and Tom. Well, I got to thinking, I'd like to write the 3rd one and have it about Eric. And then what I decided, and I thought about that for a while, and I decided, well, what I'll do is I will have Eric travel around through the Rockies and come down and finally drop down, because it'll be about 10 years later again, just like this 2nd book, into the Boise area. And this is, late 1800, early 1890s, somewhere in that area. I, on purpose, didn't put dates on those. And then he was going to come across to Jordan Valley, and then cross from Jordan Valley up through here, through Sylvie's, and end up at Prairie City. And it's going to be historically accurate. The ranch is going to be there. I've already went down and talked to Mike, I can't remember his last name. He's got several books out too, and he lives in Jordan Valley. I can't remember his last name.
Family.
What's that?
Family.
Yes, that's it. Anyway, I went down and talked to him for an afternoon and got his books and talked to him about what Jordan Valley was like then, because that's where Eric is going to go. He's going to go through Silver City and then Jordan Valley, which I was shocked how prosperous Jordan Valley was. I mean, at one time it was something else. And so it's like, whoa, I'm dropping my guy into that. That's cool. And then he's going to come across and then up and work at Sylvie's, and I'm going to have to talk to them about what it was like then, the Sylvie's Ranch. And then he's going to go up and end up in Prairie City. Now, I had an idea for a book. I've had it for 20 years, called Miner's Creek. Up in the Strawberries, I've hunted most of my life up there elk hunting. There's a place that's Miner's Creek, and there's an old miner's cabin there for years and years. My family's the only ones that even knew it was there. The trail doesn't lead to it. You got to go off these places, and then you get on this little trail, and then you go up there, and people probably know it by now, but there was an old shack right there falling down, at least 100 years old or better, and this old mine right there, Miner's Creek. And I had an idea, and this was contemporary times. In fact, I had this idea before that fire burnt the basin out. of something going on, some outlaws in there, and they kidnap a woman and take her up into there, and then she escapes, and then some hunters rescue her, and they end up in this cave, and they're fighting the bad guys off, and set a fire, and this whole thing burns out. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, the basin did burn out. Well, they're all dead now, I can say it. My uncle may have said that. I'm not sure, but Clyde, he may have done it. He talked about how crappy he was for a lot of times. But I have no proof to that. Anyway, I got to thinking about that story, and I'm thinking about this, and I changed that story to back then, and it's going to be Eric. And it's going to be that time frame, same basic idea, when there's going to be a lot of changes because it's now 1890 instead of 1970. But I saw that idea and I was able to adapt it to a new setting. Same concept, new setting. So I thought that was pretty cool. Well, brings me to the third reason that poem has significance to me. When I read that poem, it's heartfelt. It was me. It was just as much me and exactly what I was feeling that only I know the true in me, and it was me. It was exactly what I was going through. But I look back on it now, and to a smaller extent, Earth. If I had to rewrite it, I don't really like the technical aspect of the wording and the choices of words and this and that. If I had to write it again, I'd change it, but I can't, because then it would lose some of the passion and who it was. Earth, I've noticed many times that I could go back now after all these years and improve it. I really could. And it wouldn't be any great big changes. It'd be a little this here and there. But I don't want to do that because I leave that, and it's a good enough book. I mean, it's not what I could do now. But I leave that the way it is as a standard to weigh my growth, how much I improve and mistakes I made. And I keep it the way it is just for that. And I just really, it was my first novel, so I really don't want to change it anyway, but I could. But that's the reason I don't touch that. But that is the third reason that's important. I see the shortcoming, and I'll tell you this right now. I start thinking I'm something. I look at that and yeah, you wrote that, and it was heartfelt, but it's really not that good. And it's like, I don't know who has seen this, the mini-series, The Stand. There's early on,
The original one?
that with,
Molly
Gary
Ringwald.
Sinise and
Molly
Stephen
Ringwald.
King's in it. So
Yeah.
anyway, there's a scene early on where Harold Lauder comes up to his unrequited loved friend, and he gives her this book of poetry. I am, here's my poem, and it's magazine. Look, Daddy, we know an author. It's like, it's small but prestigious. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's small, but it's prestigious. So I relate to that every time and Stephen King must have done that too, because he wrote it. And that's exactly what any author would think, is like, he wrote that. That's what he wanted. He must have experienced that one time or another. Had to have. It's just too obvious. And so that kind of keeps me, that's the third reason, that just kind of keeps me from getting too carried away, because I could do better. No matter how much I grow and develop, and there are times I can see it. I can see my own development, but I also know it's like, man, I could do better. I look back, every book I look back and I'm like, well, I could have done better. I just apply that to the next one. Just grow. I keep growing. Now there's one more excerpt I'm going to read. This is Trail Lost Hope. Which one is it here? This one. This is the very end. Everything's been resolved. Well, pretty much everything. And spoiler, if you haven't read it, very first, Blaine kills a girl. She's like 15, 16 years old, and it's either kill her or she's going to kill him, and he didn't know she was a girl. So it's sad, but there it was. So I don't know how much of this I'm going to read. He takes the mother out for a walk, and other people know that he did that, and he had never mentioned it to her. Her name is Ruth. So he takes her out after Tom has been buried and then all this, getting right toward the end of the book. Ruth, I need to tell you something. I'm not sure how to say it. I hope you can understand. All I ask is that you hear me out. Blaine proceeded to tell her, staring out over the creek, of what had happened from the moment Joe had been shot out from under him till he had first talked to her. She listened in silence, eyes downcast as he told the story. And so he finished. I'm the one that killed your girl. He fell silent and stared at the ground. Blaine, she said quietly, look at me. He looked up, a stricken look on his face. I suspected, she said. I saw the look on your face more than once when it came up. And nobody wanted to talk about it much. It's clear that no one else thinks badly of you for it. I killed your girl, he forced out. How can you not hold that against me? No, she said fiercely. You did what you had to. Merck and McCraden are who killed her. Just as surely as we're sitting here. She paused. Merck never said so, but I figured she was dead when he came back from watching the trail. I heard the shots and I knew it wasn't him. After that, he wasn't in a real hurry. But why, he asked with heavy grief, why did she try to shoot me? Ruth shook her head. All I can say is that Merck hurt her and hurt her bad. I don't think she could see straight, and I don't think she was thinking straight either. A tear slid down her cheek. I do know that she would have had one thought, and one thought only, kill him and rescue me. She shrugged. Other than that, I doubt if we'll ever know for sure. Kind of a loose end. And there are other things in my books which sometimes they're subtle, are loose ends, because that's real life. Not everything ties up there. And so I keep in mind, and I don't want to get too crazy, I don't want some like really wild loose end that just unravels the whole story, but I like loose ends here and there that give it a touch of reality. You'll never know. You'll never know why this. Or I start my stories at a place. Very little gets said about what happened before. And it's not so much a loose end, but I take it up there. I don't try to explain stuff before. And there's things that happened that I don't explain. And sometimes there's things that just don't get resolved, that you just got to move on. Sometimes they recognize it, sometimes they don't. I try not to contradict, but I think, for me, this is my style. This is how I write. I like realism. I like to being true to that, and real stories, real life has loose ends. So that is what I do. As far as my self-publishing, pros, cons, methods of writing and stuff like that, I'll touch on that real quick, and then pretty much I'm going to be done. The self-publishing is really good. As I said earlier, you are your boss. You're the one doing the work. It's your idea, it's your baby. The end result is going to be what you want it to be. Nowadays, there's so many tutorials, so much help to help you improve your writing and your grammar and flow and stuff like that. Where it used to be an editor, now it's kind of like the computer does, but there is a wealth of information out there. Anybody wanting to write, I mean, you can do it. But at the end of the day, it's you. It's your story. It has to be what you want it to be. And that is one of the pros of self-publishing. Everything I did, it was quite a learning curve. I mean, when I first started, I keep some of the old first copies around like, you know, it was the wrong font and the wrong format. It was all these things. I had to figure out how the headlines and the paging and what font, all these things. It was quite a process. And the covers, like I said, I contracted out these first 5 and they're really good. To me, it was a small price to have something really noticeable. But now I know I can do my own cover. Now these were kind of almost blasé, but they're westerns, and the next one will be a lot better. I learned the basics of doing covers. You can do that now too. I mean, there's nothing you can't do to your own book, self-publishing. But there's no one to gainsay you. There's no one to suggest something else when it's just you. Well, you can, the tutorials and all that stuff, but even then you must recognize and receive what they're saying, instead of someone looking at it, talking to you face to face, saying, here, I think you should do this, or this would be better. I mean, specifically for that specific book. So there's cons to it. It's a lot of hard work, and you got to be dedicated if you're going to do it yourself. You have to be, because it's got great reward, but sometimes it's pretty hard. It's a lot of work. not just getting it done, send it to an editor and be done, but I'm glad I did it. It has really helped me improve. It's a lot of satisfaction, like, this is mine, this is what I did. At the same time, if you have a problem with story flow, if your timeline flow, if you have a problem with that, it might not be the best idea, because you gotta know what you're doing. And it's a learning curve, so don't be upset if you're gonna write and it doesn't work out too good at first. Keep at it, rewrite it, check it out. Give it to somebody, go to a writer's group, see what they say. That wasn't my route, but by all means, my route is my route, no one else's. It helps me improve. All this stuff, the self-publishing, it helped me improve all the way around. One last thing I'm going to, method of writing. I think I already covered a lot of that, how I write, my idea, my philosophy of writing, the characters and the setting and the true. So I think I've already got that in the covers. I'm going to give one last little story. When I first put Westra onto Amazon, there was a contest. It was a new works contest, not new author, new works. Well, Westra I just put it up for publication, and it was, you could do the first 5,000 words and then go. Well, I got up to the second part. I didn't make it to the top. And the critique, actually, I need to go step back. My sister mentioned this a while back, that I put a lot of detail in my books. And I mentioned before the meeting to some of you that I see them as a movie. I mean, a lot of times this idea, several of these books are like, it was in my head, that's it. And then I got to write it out, which is a little difficult sometimes, because now, well, I've already seen it. I know where it goes, 100 pages down the road. So, kind of work there sometimes. But there are surprises that come up, so that's good. But I do a lot of detail because I want to share how vivid that thought in my head is. I want to make sure people get the right idea of what I'm seeing, what I'm sharing. And she wrote, and by all means, I'm not comparing myself with these guys. It's the writing style that she recognizes similarity. She said a while back that she reread Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey. She said they gave so much detail. And I see where you get that now. And there's other writers over the years, a lot of science fiction writers, and a lot of detail. Some do too much. Well, in this case of Westra, that first 5,000 words, I sent that in, and they liked it. They thought it was good, but then one of the critiques was, well, unless you're needed, this is probably too much detail. And it's unfortunate because I had that detail in there on purpose. I over-detailed it on purpose. Because the whole point of Westra, was at the very first, this guy is captured and he's there and he's got all these ideas about how he's going to work his way through this and that, and he notices everything because, all the details. And right after the end of that 5,000 is where it came clear that this was all a made-up world. So all these details and all this stuff and all this work and it meant nothing. It was just like a reality oil painting. There's nothing real to it. It could be modified just like that. And that's what, it was kind of a play. To me it was, I had all this detail, and right after the end of that 5,000 words, it all came to nothing. All his attention to detail, it was nothing. It was useless. But they didn't get to see that part, so they critiqued that there was too much detail. And they liked it, but they thought that, so. Well, I'm over. I'm going to ask you guys, I appreciate the library staff so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate bringing it up and doing this for us. So I think you guys ought to give them a round of applause. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Well, I'm done. Any questions? Remarks? Critiques?
I have
Too
a
much
question.
detail?
I thought you did great. That's pretty
Yes.
interesting.
So when you do your character development, do you put the name down and then kind of list out character or kind of traits of that person? Or how do you develop your character? Or is it while you're writing you figure that out?
I kind of both. I don't write down much about what their characteristics are. I already see in the context of the story what they're going to be doing, where they are and what they are. So it's kind of like they develop as I write, almost like they develop themselves, just like the story catches me by surprise sometimes. And I know it's me doing it, but it's kind of an unconscious, internal thing to where I've got this idea how this person should go, and then later on I can look back and see whether they're true or not. But no, I don't write down too much that way, but I do pay attention. I mean, I know what I want them to do and what I want them to be, and then I kind of let it develop as the story. But like I said earlier, the story develops the characters, and the characters develop the story and does it at the same time. Each one is dependent on each other. So, yeah, that's what I do. Very little writing down each one, even though I have at times. So. Anybody else?
I have another question. So, sorry, I just got done reading the Candle one.
The which one? Light or dark candle?
Yeah, and I really liked it. But how do you think of the names and the spellings? Like, because it is like another kind of, it's fantasy, I guess. You know, you're kind of in a different world, but
Sometimes it just comes to me, and other times I kind of think about the setting and try to relate it to another culture or a time of history that it might be somewhat similar to. Sometimes it's a combination, and sometimes it's just a do, and it's like, oh, that works. And sometimes it doesn't. And I have to keep going. And so it's no cut and dried anything. But yeah,
Isn't it like Stephen King said that he developed characters as he went, and they reminded him of other people, but then he saw them and it was like they just came to be and they became alive, and then he wrote them in his books and gave them life. I think that's the way your characters are, aren't they?
yeah, that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. They
that's the
develop.
way
It's
you
like they
spoke
take
of
a long
it.
life of themselves.
I think it's a lot
Yeah.
like that in a way, but different a little bit. Like the characters that are the Western people, it's like the Western men, women, remind me of some of the people that were past Harney Countyans, and when I was little, and you could see them and
Mhm.
you could think of them. And that one cowboy guy reminds me of this cowboy that was here, but he's no longer alive. But
Yeah.
that's just a character of him, the way that he was. You could see him riding his horse,
Yep.
you know, and it's a great character reference. And he just came to life again in that book when he's been gone for a long time. And I was little, and he was a young man then, probably of 20 or 30, and he's alive in that book. It's
Yep.
amazing. But Stephen King said that he could see his characters and that he gave them life in that book. And I think that's the way that some of your characters are, that they came to life and they came to live in those books, and then they're in the series, and then
Yep.
things happen because that's life of that book, and it's life in
Yep.
our life and stuff like that, like Stephen King and other authors said about bringing the characters to life. They could
Yep.
see them and they could realize them, and they could see that spirit of that character that they brought to life. So I think that's kind of the way that it is in your books, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, that's another way I develop characters. When I see what they're going to be doing, okay, this character is here, this is the setting and what kind of person, basic, foundational, this person is going to be, then I start thinking about people I've seen in something similar. And just like I mentioned here for Dad, a lot of this guy is Dad, and a lot of it is me. I look back at the things because I was raised, for the Westerns especially, because I was raised on a ranch. And Dad, anybody that knew him knew he was the old time guy. I mean, he was 8 years old, and his first job at 8 years old was being a horse wrangler on Murray's Creek Ranch. He was raised above Prairie City, just by the basin up there on the Bald Hills. He was raised there. He was a horse chasing, elk hunter, rancher. I mean, this guy was hardcore. Truck driver, cat skidder. I mean, he was an amazing man. And so I was able to tap into that, my memories of him, and how I reacted to that, both positively and negatively, to get characters and how I react to all the people. I've met a lot of people. I mean, I was in the service for a lot of years, been around the world, and I mean, Harney County itself has a wealth of characters. I mean, most characters here. But some of the people I've met, I mean, all around the world, just and how they react to others, how they reacted to us. You know, you go into France, how those people react to American sailors, how people react, Americans act in these other countries. All that stuff is fodder. They all develop characters. They all give me little insights, little this, little that. You know, if I say a horse does something in here, chances are that's how the horse is going to be. If I explain some of the electronics, even though I'm not true science fiction and certain, some of the old science fiction masters, they got in serious detail about, you know, how this machinery worked. Well, I didn't do that here. I just kind of had, almost like Star Trek, you know, you see the brig, but you don't know how this stuff works, other than Spock's crawled in, you know, to the guts of it. But you see it, and that's what I do. I try to describe what it looks like and what it does, but I don't get into the true hardcore, like some of the old masters, they really got into this stuff. And I didn't want to have too much detail, even for me. So, yeah, that's what I do with characters a lot. They tend to do themselves, but sometimes it's intentional, a combination. If something ain't working, I go back and, why is this not working? And redo it. Anything else? Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to buy a book, I got books to buy. They're a lot cheaper than getting them on Amazon. So if you're interested, I'll break them out for you. And so I made my hour. That's cool.
Yeah.
I was kind of worried I wasn't
Some
going
of
to
the
fill in
library, I'm
the hour.
gonna buy his books and put them in the library so we can check them out.
We
and
have
look
them
at
in the
'em.
library.
Oh, you do?
Uh-huh.
Oh, duh, like I really know, okay?
Yep, every one of them's in the library.
I didn't know.
Except for
okay?
Los Pinos, it's checked out.
Yeah, right. Not they're not beautiful, but you know how you like to look at the character and see that and see how the character comes alive in that book, and it reminds you of things, and you see that character alive and real in that book when it's just on paper, but the essence and the spirit is there.